Alderwoman Hubbard.
Present.
Alderman Carter.
Present.
Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderwoman Green.
Here.
Chairman Kennedy.
Here.
8 present, you have a quorum.
Okay, we have several bills before the committee. We were, or had scheduled the chief to be here to talk about a number of police matters. He was out of town. And so we will reschedule his being here to come before the committee. In between that time, if you have some other specific questions for him, you can let me know. I can submit that to him so he can come prepared with some of the information we may need. So he will not be here today. With that, we would take up Board Bill, it was 133. Alderwoman Davis.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, Board Bill 133 is a board bill to recognize some history in the city of St. Louis in the Jeff Vanderloo neighborhood. For over 2 years, or maybe 3 years, the descendants of Miss Tilley, who owned a convenience store in the neighborhood for 40-something years, have worked to reestablish that corner, to bring community activity to the corner, and also to put her legacy in place. She was one of the first people who actually owned her own business in that neighborhood back then, and was very generous to the, most especially the youth in that neighborhood. But having that convenience store there was wonderful for everybody. And so along with trying to provide it with National Historic Registry and also having it designated as a city landmark is something that they've been working on. Unfortunately, before the national was certified, the building actually was destroyed in a storm. And so there's no physical thing there for the National Registry to proclaim. But in the meantime, we've still moved forward. The family has rebuilt a small building there. They have a community garden there, and they're also having classes there, and they have a great partnership with the neighborhood, the high school, and some other entities, most especially the Landmark Association. So I'm standing before you to ask for approval to have this designated as Tilley's Corner. And I think in the past you all have received a lot of information about it and hear me talk about it because I give all credit to her granddaughter, Carla Alexander, who, and her husband, Miguel, who worked very hard on this. Of course, we have some things we've been doing, but I give them all the credit because there's a lot of legwork involved. And so I ask you for your approval.
Okay. Any questions from members of the committee? Alderman Schmidt.
Yes, first of all, thank you for this. This is a unique situation in which I think what you're doing in part is memorializing the fact that this corner stood for so many years.
Absolutely.
So does this, I mean, there are some provisions that limit what can be built here, right?
Yes, and we've gone through all of that. The physical structure is already finished, and I must give credit as well to E.M. Harris, who stepped in and helped a lot with the design and the construction.
Okay. So thank you for your work on that.
You're welcome.
Alderman Boyd.
No questions.
Alderman French.
No questions.
Alderman Arnowitz.
No questions.
Alderwoman Hubbard.
No questions.
Alderman Carter. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderwoman Green. Any questions? Okay. With that, we can, did you have any closing remarks?
The only thing I'd like to say is that I am appreciative of the opportunity for the young people in the neighborhood to know and understand what was there, and hopefully give some of them some dreams to have ownership and be more a part of their community.
Excellent.
Thank you.
With that, we could entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
That was Arnowitz. It's been moved and seconded that we pass Board Bill 133 out with a due pass recommendation. Any discussion on the motion? If not, Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Alderman Bosley. Alderman Schmidt.
Aye.
Alderman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderman French.
Aye.
Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Arnowitz.
Aye.
Alderwoman Hubbard.
Aye.
Alderman Carter. Alderwoman Ingracia.
Aye.
Alderwoman Green.
Aye.
Chairman Kennedy.
Aye.
8 aye votes do pass.
Okay. By
Thank
your
you.
vote, we have passed out Board Bill 133 with a do pass recommendation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. In the spirit of trying to take the board bills from individuals who are not on the committee, is Alderman Conway here? Okay, we'll give him a moment. We'll go to Board Bill 214, Alderman Ogilvy.
Morning. Board Bill 214 renews a package liquor license moratorium within the boundaries of the 24th Ward. The language is identical, I believe, to the bill passed in sometime in 2011.
And this extends it for another 3 years?
Extends it for another 3 years, yep. And this only pertains to new package liquor licenses.
Questions from members of the committee? Alderman Schmidt?
Just an observation, as you well know, I get a lot of comments about this, but you're not getting negative comments about this.
Not really. There's more debate, at least within my area. There's more debate around on sale liquor rather than packaged liquor, and this moratorium doesn't pertain to those licenses. It just pertains to new package licenses. Also, for whatever reason within the ward, there's seems to be within my ward there's an abundance of places that currently have licenses for packaged liquor at the moment, including a number of gas stations. So there's no shortage of places to purchase alcohol at the moment.
Alderman Boyd?
No questions.
Alderman French?
No questions.
Alderman Ornowitz?
No questions.
Alderwoman Hubbard?
No questions.
Alderman Carter? Alderwoman Ingracia?
No questions.
Alderwoman Green?
No questions.
Okay, you have any closing remarks?
Nope, just appreciate the committee's favorable consideration. Thank you.
Okay. With that, we can entertain a motion. It's been moved and seconded that we pass Board Bill 214 out with a do pass recommendation. There's been a request for previous roll. Any opposition to previous roll? Seeing no opposition to previous roll, by your vote, we have passed out Board Bill 214 with a do
Thank
pass
you.
recommendation. Thank you. Still no Alderman Conway. Okay. Okay, we'll hold on 207. Let's go to Board Bill 220. Alderman Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This is going to sound a little like deja vu. This is also a packaged liquor moratorium for 3 years for the 15th Ward. We've been experiencing in the southern half of the ward many of the same issues of an overabundance of packaged liquor licenses that are being issued. And just since taking office, I've had 3 different more packaged liquor license requests for that same area. And I've been working closely with the Community Development Corporation, trying to make plans for redevelopment of this area of the ward and be a little bit more strategic with the types of businesses we are bringing in. So again, this doesn't apply to bars or restaurants for regular liquor license. It's just for that packaged liquor where there's already an abundance of options to purchase packaged liquor.
Okay. Any questions from members of the committee? Alderman Schmidt?
Yeah, people have pointed out to me, and I agree that there are currently, obviously, processes that the city has, such as protest petitions and signing or not signing the circle. And people have talked about neighborhood contracts where folks in the neighborhood can come forward and talk about these things, but you've not found that to be an effective means of dealing with it.
One of the issues we run into at the moment is Targrove South does not have a neighborhood organization. We're in the process of building it. So at the moment, most of the work is between myself and the Community Development Corporation, which again is only a year old and is trying to be more strategic in our
So I
development.
appreciate it's pretty time intensive for residents to try to deal with it on their own. Thank you. I don't have anything else.
Alderman Boyd,
No questions, thank you.
Alderman French.
No questions.
We'll give you a moment.
No, I have
No questions, okay.
I apologize.
He didn't hear the announcement. Alderman Ornowitz. Okay. Alderwoman Hubbard.
No questions.
Alderman Carter. Alderwoman Ingracia. Okay, then, with that, any closing remarks?
I would just appreciate your favorable recommendation.
Okay, with that, we could entertain a motion.
So moved.
Been moved and seconded that we pass, oh, we didn't get a second.
Second. Second.
Hubbard did.
Well, I have added to previous one.
He must be on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That gives enough. It's been moved and seconded that we pass Board Bill, what is this now? 220 out with a due pass recommendation. There's been a request for previous roll. Is there any? Yeah, object. There's opposition to previous roll. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Alderman Bosley, Alderman Schmidt,
Aye.
Alderman Boyd,
Aye.
Alderman French, Alderman Vaccaro,
Aye.
Alderman Arnowitz,
Aye.
Alderwoman Hubbard,
Aye.
Alderman Carter,
Aye.
Alderwoman Ingracia, Alderwoman Green,
Aye.
Chairman Kennedy.
Aye.
10 aye votes do pass.
By your vote, we have passed our Board Bill 220 with a due pass recommendation. Thank you. We still do not have Conway. Okay, we'll go on to Board Bill 134. I'll go up. Madam Vice Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the committee, Board Bill 134 would designate the old New Age Federal Savings and Loan Building, which is located at 1401 North Kings Highway, as a historic landmark in the city. That was the first African-American owned loan and banking facility in the city, established initially there. The organization was established back in 1916, but they built a new location there around 1958. And it was the leading as the only one in the African-American community. The building still stands. Since that time, it closed somewhere in the late 80s, and the building became a photography business, and now they've continued some photography services there, and it's acted as an office. This is across from the Victor Roberts building. So it's in between Minerva and Ridge. There on North Kings Highway. It is a significant historical site for the city, and this will give them the opportunity to take advantage of various types of both state and federal monies that could help them bring that building back up. And so I do ask for your favorable support.
We'll take questions from members of the committee. Alderman Schmidt,
Fantastic idea, no questions. Thanks.
Alderman Boyd. No questions, thank you. Alderman Vaccaro,
No question.
Alderman Arnowitz,
No questions.
Alderman Hubbard,
No questions.
Alderman Carter, Alderwoman Ingracia, Alderwoman Green.
No questions.
Recognize the sponsor to close.
I do ask for your favorable support.
I'll entertain a motion. A second.
Previous
There's been a motion for previous roll. Seeing no objection. Board Bill 134 passes with a due pass recommendation.
Thank you. We will hold then at this point Board Bill 207, if we've not heard anything. Okay. That completes all the bills that we had on the agenda. I did want to have a brief discussion from a discussion that we had back in August. And that was this committee discussing its thoughts and ideas on its relationship to the newly brought into the city police department. We talked about, for example, does this committee itself want to hold monthly meetings for the public, seeing that there's no longer a board of police commissioners? Do we want to look at establishing some other kind of citizen advisory body? There were several things that were bounced around back in August. And I just wanted to take an opportunity to bring that back up to us so we can be thinking about it and then seeing how we want it to go. My thoughts would be is to have a lengthier discussion about it and see how the committee wants to go and then see if we want to do any kind of resolutions or requires any legislation. Just generally, what are our thoughts about that? I just wanted to bring the conversation back up so we can get it going. Any thoughts and ideas? Alderman French.
Yeah, I think it's a good discussion to have. I think obviously with the events in the last few months, there's a great hunger from folks for change and some level of accountability and at least involvement and at the very least more transparency in how we police in the city. So I think it's a good thing. And I think it is since we got local control, it is work that remains for us to finish that process and to make sure we actually create those systems of accountability. And I think actually we have less accountability than we used to have because we don't have that formal process that we used to have under the old police board. So anything we can do to remedy that, I think is a good thing.
Alderwoman Hubbard.
I just wanted to, I guess maybe add to that and also see if some questions could be answered as to what our direct role will be with local control and how we will navigate through that process. Because I know in some of those earlier meetings, there were some statements made by the chief and others as if we didn't have certain authorities over certain things. And so I think we need to clearly define what our role is and how we move forward.
Alderman Schmidt.
So there's a whole lot of things going on, as we well know. One process I understand is that the Public Safety Director, Richard Gray, had talked about having some public safety meetings, I think in 1520 Market. I'm only aware of one that occurred. And I'm obviously it wasn't necessarily focused on the police department. Mr. Chairman, obviously you have the legislation for the oversight board that is currently before us. So that's another mechanism. But in the meantime, since there is no police board, it might be helpful as you're defining it and as we're discussing to talk about what that might look like in the interim. Obviously, since 1915, we didn't have control of the police department. We now have that. There's sort of a vacuum at this point. I know some of the police commissioners were interested in terms of some of the experience and wisdom that they had. We have Richard Gray, obviously, who was part of that. But tapping into those resources, having the Board of Aldermen actively, neither, as a cheerleader or a decrier, to be there in this interim period sounds like it could be a very helpful tool. I think that might be coordinated, obviously, with both, and I know you're looking at this certainly with Richard Gray, the Public Safety Director, and with the Chief. So I think at this point, but at some point it would be most helpful if that oversight board, in fact, would take up that charge. I think, not that we wouldn't continue to be involved, but it might be on a less frequent basis, something on that order. At least those are my thoughts at this time.
Alderman Boyd?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I would be curious as to what other cities similar size of the city of St. Louis, what processes do they have in place to govern their police department?
Alderwoman Gracia?
Alderman Schmidt, I had a question for you with respect to your thoughts on the Civilian Oversight Board taking charge of receiving public input on policing. Is that what you suggested, or am I not clear on that, as opposed to the Public Safety Committee?
Well, I think we're still defining what everybody's roles are going to be. It doesn't mean that we are removing ourselves from that process. I just think that we're talking about having a group, and I know that Alderman Kennedy has provided some provisions that talk about the educational process and some of the specific things that the Oversight Board might do. You know, it's good to have that sunshine. It also can become sort of unwieldy if you have 3 or 4 different groups that are sort of looking at the same thing, and it's a bit unfair to the chief to have to go to 3 or 4 different meetings. I think when we could all work together, it doesn't mean that we're precluded from those. We could have our own meetings as well, less frequently, and we could also go to the Oversight Board type meetings, I think, as well.
Thank you.
At least that's just the way. Anybody, there's probably a multitude of
You can believe it.
permutations on that one.
Any other thoughts right now? Alderman Green?
No, I feel often like there's really a call for us to be doing something. People keep asking, you know, what are you doing at the Board of Aldermen to address some of these policing issues? And I think that, you know, we know that the Citizen Oversight Board is in the works and is moving forward, and I think that we need to be looking at both short and long-term things that we can be doing here to show that we are starting to look at and address some of these issues. And I think making sure that those conversations are not just us sitting at this table, but that we are really advertising and encouraging the public to come in and talk to us and tell us what they expect from us around some of these issues. I think looking at what other cities are doing is great, and whatever decisions we make has got to have the buy-in of the people of the city of St. Louis, and so we need to be providing ample opportunity to have that feedback.
Would you see then a public input portion to this discussion? You know, this discussion is around what is the board's and this committee's role should be in relationship to the police as it comes a part of the city again. Would you see a public input process as a part of this? I
think that there's a couple of steps to it. I think first, you know, seconding what Alderman Hubbard said about knowing what we can actually do, because there seems to be a lot of different information depending upon who you talk to about what authority we actually have. But then I think the second phase of that is, you know, once we figure out what that authority actually is, what parts of that authority do the public want us to use, and making sure that the public is informed on how we are going to use that authority. So just transparency to our systems.
Alderman,
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I wanted to just share with you some of the things that appear to have worked extremely well with the community in the past, and I go back to Chief Harmon. And we had some issues with understanding and knowing and having information shared, and he created a Citizens Advisory Board under the police chiefs, and the aldermen selected the people who actually sat there and represented their communities. Along with that, there was a lot of training done too, so we could understand how policing was done, because a lot of people have different understandings of different things, and that was extremely helpful because people learned how to not only understand the process, but how to help improve their neighborhoods by reporting properly, all kinds of things. Yes, we have NOM. I encourage it, the neighborhood, program. I encourage my residents for that, but that's all volunteer. But if you have a structure in place where this information is going back and forth, residents knew that they could call these representatives to talk about anything, any concern they had. It was direct. They trusted them. Sometimes when you have too much political things going back and forth, it gets messy. So it's something to think about, suggesting something like that. And there's never anything wrong with us improving our information through technology, too. We need to do that as well. It needs to come from the police department on different actions and changes that they're making. I just learned now that how many additional police cars I have in my area. I didn't know that, but there should have been a place where I could go and look that up. So having more information available to people, I think, is critical too. And we have the public safety director at our disposal to talk to all the time and to get information. So I don't know. And now we also have the opportunity for even the police officers can work with the Civil Service Commission now. So even that is another thing that was kind of messy, who actually looked at discipline and stuff. So we got some tools coming forward, and most especially with the Civil Review, I think there's a way to make sure that citizens have more input and control versus elected officials. Thank you.
Alderman Kennedy?
Alderman.
I'd like to suggest as well that we do a better job of reaching out to the Police Officers Association. I think they are an important piece of the conversation. It's one thing to have a conversation with the chief. It's another thing to talk to the people who are responding to calls and out on the streets every day.
Mm-hmm. And you see some way that we should involve them in this discussion in some way?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Alderman Carter?
I'll defer to Alderman Boyd
I didn't know he had.
if he
Alderman
wanted
Boyd
to speak. I know he's a senior
I
officer.
didn't see his hand.
Thank you. I was just going to bring up the fact that I think it would be helpful if we had documentation on the roles of the Board of Police Commissioners, so that we would get a clear understanding of how they operated under Board of Police Commissioners, so that if we come up with a particular policy, we can make sure we know what worked well, what was good, what they would change, and moving forward. Because there are a lot of, maybe I shouldn't say a lot, but there certainly have been some changes as to how the hiring practices and maybe promotional practices, I don't know. But I think we need to understand all of that if you were trying to come up with some way to, I don't know, regulate, communicate, manage, whatever we're trying to do.
Alderman Carter?
Yeah. So I don't know what all was said. 'Cause I was in another hearing. Everything. So let me just get my take. So for fighting for this piece of legislation, local control in Jefferson City, we had one vision at the time, and the vision was for us to give the residents of this city a chance to change the policies and the problems that we were having with the police department, and for us to be like any other city in the country. Now within breaking all of that down, a lot of stuff has changed since then, and we simply wanted to put it in the hands of the people and of the local representation to not micromanage, but to basically make the necessary changes so we can create a positive change with the police department. And so I'm saying that to say this. When I was a rep, our whole vision was to put it in you all's hands, and which now I guess is my hands too. And so somewhere in between, I don't know what happened. In a sense, it's a lot that we can do to change different things within the department. I think that everyone should be at the table, like Alderwoman from the 6th Ward just said. But at the same time, I think it is in our hands, and people are looking for us to change, something, because right now it just doesn't seem like stuff's working. and the civilian review board. I'm on board with it. You know that, but this is something that I believe that the mayor can create on his own right now without us, right? And so I know that he's the main sponsor of the bill. So my question would be, I mean, not the main sponsor, but I know that he has co-sponsored the bill, and that he's for the bill, and that he was in talks to create the bill. But if this is something that is on his top list of priorities, we don't have to do it this route. He can just create that. And so my question is, how come he hasn't created that with the input of some of us and some of the residents in our fine city? And so I'm kind of leery to now support that bill, because I don't know if it will be as effective as it really should be. So.
Sorry. You completed? Okay. Alderman Schmidt?
Something that I thought of when Alderman Carter was speaking, and that is, I remember that Alderman Greg Carter had a number of meetings. I believe you were in attendance as well, and so was I, with public safety at Harris Stowe State University. It's out there in the community. There could be other places as well, obviously, but I think it's more accommodating, more user-friendly, so to speak, more inviting for people to come to those meetings, and we could possibly get more discussions and open that up as well. I think that could be another route to take.
There are a number of things that were said that we feel we need to get some information on first. Are there any individuals that we feel we need to bring before us that would help us in this discussion? Alderman Hubbard?
You're talking about in regards to local control in our
Yeah,
roads?
yeah, this role, the role of this.
I just think that we would totally benefit and get a thorough understanding of just the inner workings of the police department if we bring in some professors and stuff from UMSL. Their criminology department is ranked like number 4 in the nation, and they can give us some insight on community policing, on different policing strategies, and just a plethora of things. And I've already spoken to Professor Klinger at UMSL, and whenever we're ready, he's willing to come in and talk to us just about anything we have some concerns about in regards to policing.
Do you think you could speak to us then about other types of models between
Definitely,
the legislative
definitely,
body and the police?
Yeah.
That could
Their
be a
staff
benefit.
is filled with experts and researchers, and
Right.
whenever there's data needed, I mean, people seek them out, and UMSL is right here in our community and are willing to assist.
Okay, excellent. Anyone else that we feel would help us to bring before us? Okay. Alderman
Mr.
Schmidt?
Chairman, you had some Department of Justice folks in the past, and I don't think we should leave them out. Obviously, the professors may be able to help us with that as well, but there seems to be a focus, obviously, on this region, so it ought to be easier now.
Okay.
I will say that if we do call in the police union, I think it's important also to bring in the organization that represents African American officers.
The ethical system.
They are not always on the same page and sometimes have a different perspective.
Sure.
I think it's important for us to hear that.
Okay. Then before we have our next discussion on this, there is some information it appears to me that we need to get. One is perhaps a legal opinion about the authority that this board has in relationship to the police. You had asked about, Alderman Boyd, about other models. We may be able to get some of that before we bring in one of the professors. Other cities, in how they have it structured, the relationship between the two bodies. We certainly can get out the description of the board of the, Board of Police Commissioners. We can get that out to everyone. And there was one other item. With that, we can also send out, which is at our access, the description of this particular committee and its role and function. Yes, sir.
Is it, so what, and this is stuff that we are asking them before the next discussion, right?
Yes, sir.
Asking them to provide us? To us?
I was going to get it together.
Oh, okay.
It's not a big staff to ask to get anything together with around here. So,
Is it possible, you know what, I would like to see, and I don't know if I should be asking for this now, but I had a recent conversation with a few people in the department, a few higher ups, and they told me that it was that they had issues that they really didn't want to talk about because they were scared of retaliation, but that there was problems just in terms of punishment and disciplinary actions between blacks and whites on the force. And I think that right now, I think yesterday, I read something on Twitter that they were trying to hire more minorities. And I think the first things first, I think we got to take care of the blacks that we have already on the department equally. And so I don't know exactly what I'm asking for, but I would probably love to see something to the effect of, and I don't even know if we can ask for this, but the disciplinary records amongst blacks versus whites on the department. Some that committed similar acts. I'm hearing that they were disciplined extremely differently and very unfairly. So, you know, I hope that that's not the case, but you know, I would love to look into that.
you know, from my perspective, all that information should be certainly available to any alderperson. Even though it's not specifically related to this topic that we're talking about right now, that information should be available to us, particularly the aggregated data. So you can request it or I can request it. We'll talk a little bit more on that. Okay. So it seems like, one, that we're saying there is benefit to furthering this conversation and seeing what kind of solutions we can come up with. And then two, there is some information we need to get before we begin this conversation again. That would be models of other cities, perhaps a legal opinion about the authority of the board in relationship to its governance of the police, description of the past Board of Police Commissioners, a description of the role and functioning of this committee as it presently stands, I guess, within the rules of the Board of Aldermen. Other suggestions were to bring in some of the academicians from UMSL to talk about other structures and models and their relationships, and possibly some representation from the Department of Justice to talk on the same topic. Yes, ma'am, Alderwoman.
Did we ever determine whether or not we were going to take on the task of having public input in our meetings, or is that something that the chief should be doing periodically outside of us?
Before, we never did, from my remembrance, make a determination on that, and that's part of this discussion here. And I would say that unless we see there's some action we want to take right away and say, well, let's begin some kind of quarterly or monthly meetings before we come up with other solutions, we could do that.
I just wanted clarification.
Yeah, we hadn't, to my remembrance. Does anybody else remember anything different than that? The committee didn't make a determination, did it?
No, the committee didn't do anything formally.
Right, right.
I still very much support the idea of monthly meetings where the chief comes in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still very much support the idea of monthly meetings where the chief does come in and report not only to us but to the public about what he is doing and the status of crime in the city, and also allow time for public comment. That is what used to happen, the monthly report part under the old system. Is the very least what could still be done, but we should have some level. I mean, I think that's the bare minimum level of accountability, and at least an opportunity to ask questions and receive data on a monthly basis.
And you'd like to see something like that interimly until we come up with a more permanent determination?
I was looking forward to the discussion today, and I'd like to see that happen monthly.
I agree with that. Crime has been on a trajectory that's out of control in the 6th Ward way before the events in Ferguson.
Yeah, it's not just in the 6th Ward. So, and as I indicated earlier, it might be helpful to have it someplace where we can accommodate.
Right, right. And you're speaking also in the evening?
Perhaps.
Perhaps,
yeah,
right.
yeah. We did that before.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right.
Be kind to us.
Okay. All right. Monthly, right now. Mhm. Okay, as we continue to work on a more permanent solution. Okay, I will speak with the chief on this and see what kind of schedule we can put together, and I'd be looking to do it in the evenings, and perhaps away from the Board of Aldermen, in the community someplace. Okay? All right. Any other points or things on our heart we want to raise on this particular issue? If not, I think we have enough to get done here in between now and our next discussion. That's what chair means, huh?
Motion to adjourn?
Okay, then, that completes our, Alderman, Conway asked to hold the bill. That's what he came in and said. So with that, I know there's a scheduled Ways and Means Committee hearing, so we will adjourn this meeting.
Is it in here?
No, it's on the other, in the leisure room. This meeting's adjourned.